Okay, so for those of you mixing plaster, in this bucket, I have 3 cups of water in this recycled container. So that's 3 of those. And let's see how many cups of plaster is needed. Okay, that's 1. Quickly sift it in there. I don't want to just dump it. Let it just sink. And don't jiggle the blue bucket or start to stir. Just let it drop. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, and see, it's beginning to develop the crust on top, but there are still pools of water around the edges. So I know I need a little bit more. This is 6. That's a pretty thick crust. So on my 6, I still have a little bit left. I'm gonna leave that out. So for the most part then, it's 1 part water, 2 parts dry plaster. So it's a 1-to-2 ratio. So you'll need twice as much plaster as you have water. And then you let it sit without jiggling the bucket, without stirring, a little bit, maybe even a few minutes, until it starts to develop that crust. So I'm gonna let it sit there. So once it's sort of soaked itself through for a while, I tend to use my hands to just stir it because I'm so used to this stuff. But you can certainly put on a pair of latex gloves to do this. Or if you have gloves in your kitchen, those rubber gloves for doing dishes, that works. You just want to make sure afterwards that you don't wash the wet plaster down the sink. You want a bucket of water on the side to rinse your hand off completely. And then you can go wash your hands. So this looks good. I'm going to go ahead, just get my hand right in there and start blending it with my hand. Now in a lot of videos, if you're looking this up too, other videos, you'll see that a lot of people use hand mixers. I don't like hand mixers because I think it introduces a lot of extra air into the mix. And that creates bubbles in your casting. So with my hand, I'm squishing all of the bubbles out. Yeah, so that's a good mix. 1 part water, 2 part plaster. Just mix it for a minute. Altogether, you probably have 5 minutes to work with this stuff. And I think I forgot to mention this in the beginning. I start with cold water. So if you use warm water, you have less time. It activates more quickly and you have less time to work with this stuff. Okay, I don't feel any more lumps. I'm gonna scrape the edges. I'm gonna scrape my hand clean a little bit. And then bring my mold over. I'm just gonna fill it up about halfway. And then I'm gonna tilt this guy and tap. rotate, tilt, tap, rotate, tilt, tap. And that's gonna help get all the bubbles of the plaster up, but it's also gonna ensure that air is not trapped in the mold, especially if you did a casting of your hand where there's a bit of a hook. So if you did a casting like this, for example, that becomes a hook and air can get trapped in here. So if I tilt it to the side and tap, I even look inside a little bit, I can see some bubbles coming up. So I kind of look inside to see a bubble come up. Okay, I just do that. Then I do the rest. And I've got to get to the rest anyway because I can tell my plaster's starting to set. Did you see that bubble come up? And a little bit more. And this casting then is just the hand. Now I could float it where I have a little gap right here still, so I can fill this whole rim with plaster. And then it's like I'll have a little plaster base almost. I don't want that, so I don't want to do that, but there we go. I'm going to show you doing that rim. So you do it just, if I do it like this, tap it flat, then the casting of the hand has a disc of plaster on it as well. And then, see all my extra? I'm gonna make sure to get that out of my bucket, put it on a plastic bag. If you have a trash can that's lined with plastic, you can go ahead and just put it in the trash too, as long as there's a plastic liner, or else it will be stuck on the inside of your garbage can. So I'm gonna put that all down here. I can leave it in here like this and just scrape that out later after it sets. I don't want to do the dishes in the sink with this because you don't want to have it go down the sink or else it'll clog inside your sink, right? And this I'm just going to let it set, and then when it gets hard I can just lift it up and throw that away. So that's how to get rid of the excess. And then my hand, I'm going to go rinse it in my bucket of water that I call my slop bucket, so it can settle in there, and then I will just throw that out. So this is the slop bucket I've been working with, and you can see that from last time I did this, the plaster residue has separated and fallen to the bottom. And so I can just dump out that excess water that's more or less clean down a sink or outside in the grass. But I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my hand in this one. I use a slop bucket for a while if I'm doing a lot of plaster work. And then let it settle. Once there's a lot of residue that falls to the bottom, then I make myself a fresh slop bucket. There, now I can go wash my hands down the sink. Okay, that's it.